Hey, my beautiful listeners, we are back with season 3 of The Beautiful Side of Grief, and I'm your host, Helen Morris. My incredible guests continue to share their own personal stories of grief in so many different forms and how they have managed to find the positives and beauty from their experiences. And I hope by listening to these honest, heartfelt accounts, you can find the tips, insights, resources, and strategies you need for where you're at here and now. And maybe one day even find a beautiful side to your grief like I have. So share away, as I would love this podcast to reach as many who need to hear it as possible. Don't forget to check out the episode notes as well for more information and links. Plus the energy healing I do that changed my life forever. And this season, I'd also love to share the affirmations and meditations I'm working on, so stay tuned for those. Right now, though, my thanks for listening, and let's check out who this week's guest is. On this episode of The Beautiful Side of Grief, we have several forms of grief that we're going to look at. Firstly, the grief as a young widow. Then the grief of being a survivor of 9 years of domestic abuse. And all of this is wrapped in and around the insidious grief of trauma. Jenna Ashlyn is a survivor, and she's my guest today, and I'm your host, Helen Morris. Jenna is currently a volunteer for Southern Ohio's Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, so I had to just break it up a wee bit, where she provides support and services to victims of abuse. She loves animals and spends her extra time just being a great mum and cuddling with her cocker spaniel. She is also the author of a couple of books, and in this episode, we're going to chat about 2 books that she has authored, Within the Grey and Sheila's Men, both of which can serve as tools in the journey of trauma recovery. And more importantly, they let you know you are not alone, you're not crazy, and that you can find your purpose again, and you can also find love again. And if you find yourself being triggered by this episode, please make sure that you have support, that you reach out to friends, a support group, or even Google support services local to where you live if you don't have anything or anyone to hand. And please know that you are loved, you deserve to be healed, and there is a reason that you are here on this earth exactly as you are. So trust and believe in that. And I'd also like to thank you for listening and joining in with us today. And I'm sending you love, light, hope, and happiness. So welcome, Jenna. It's truly wonderful to spend this time with you today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So, Jenna, I thought that we'd start this episode off with a new thing that I've been doing for 2022, and that's setting an intention for each episode. And today I would like that intention, by the time this episode is over, for our listeners to be left with the belief that life can be beautiful on the other side of trauma. How's that sound?
That sounds amazing and so, so true. That's everything that I stand for and everything that I believe.
Fantastic. So we're right in alignment right from the get-go. So I love that. Now, just before we get into your story, you are such an incredible writer. You know, you're very, very talented at what you do. And you've actually had a few accolades and awards that you've amassed over the last few years. So would you like to start by sharing with us what it is that you've won for your writing?
Absolutely. I think that it all started Within the Grey. And I remember the Star Jewel National Showcase for Talent. I had just started the first few pages of Within the Grey, and I saw that it was an option, and I just kind of felt, hey, why not? So I took those first few pages of the book that I was starting at that time, and I had them typed up really nicely, and I sent it away, and I won for those first few pages the overall national award for that. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yes, it was just the first few pages. I don't even think I had edited it yet. That is such a mouthful sometimes.
I agree. Had you been writing a lot beforehand?
I hadn't written in years. I was always a writer growing up and had always just had a natural talent for that. But I guess it just kind of flowed out of me in such a beautiful way that it was very descriptive and very visual, and it was something that you could really feel. And people really picked up and embraced that. Now, fast forward a little while later, I actually had put samples of it on Wattpad. And on there, I entered a couple of competitions. And before it was published, before it was even completed, Within the Gray won for Best in Women's Fiction and Best Character for my protagonist. Oh no, the girl.
the main character.
Yes. So she was deemed favorite from the very, very beginning. And that was before it was even published. And then I went into Marshall University in West Virginia, and I started taking some classes, and there was this competition I didn't even know about. And one day I got this random email from one of my professors saying, hey, I nominated you for one of the Meyer Awards because and only professors can nominate. And it's for the very, very best of the best writers at Marshall University. And a piece of that actually was adapted and put into Sheila's Men.
Oh my goodness me. What an incredible feeling. Just right from the get-go to get that first accolade and then to have it cemented with these other ones. That must have been the best feeling and truly making you feel that you were on the right path.
Most definitely. I had left my corporate job as a retail sales manager to start embracing my creative side and getting back to who I was as a child and growing up, because I was always a writer. There's always a part of me that is writing in one way or another, but I just didn't have the time, and my children were little and they needed me. And so I didn't have the extra time. So it was basically getting back to myself. And that was really a part of my journey, was embracing who I am. And another interesting fact, as far as accolades are going, is that my publisher and I actually held off the publication of Sheila's Men so that it could still be in the running and be nominated this year for a Pulitzer.
Oh my goodness me. Oh, that is incredible. I love that you've just set that bar so high.
I know. I'm really concerned, but if you don't try, my publisher says if you don't try, then you'll never really know. And it does tackle a lot of very important things that are going on in the world today. And it's a book that needs to be read and needs to be out there because it's there to help people.
Perfect. So we're going to get into that a bit down the line. But just on your writing, look, I so understand what you were talking about, because I too have always been a bit of a writer, certainly not of the caliber you are. However, I made a decision last year that I was going to let my writing speak for myself, speak from my heart, speak for my heart. And I've started doing that again and putting it out, and I can just feel people relating to that. And it's such a cool feeling when it's your own voice, your own words that are having that impact.
Absolutely. I know what you mean. I've had that happen a few times, because whenever I was still writing Sheila's Men, I put it out there because it is separated into two parts. So I sent out part one to some of my faithful followers and readers, and I asked their opinions, and I asked a few questions. Are there any holes? How do you feel about this? How are you relating to it? And all of them thanked me and told me how powerful it was and how much they could relate to it and how beautiful it was really going to be. They were all very excited, very supportive. And I kept hearing the words, and throughout the whole process, I keep hearing the words powerful. It spoke to me. It's just like my story. And it's very nice because I've somehow become the voice for the voiceless.
That is such an incredible purpose and path you're on. And I'm so grateful that you cast aside whatever was happening in your life to allow yourself the space to do that. So well done. So let's now talk about you being widowed at a young age. How old were you? And what was that like for you?
I was 30 years old. My husband was 11 years older than me. So I ended up with 3 step teenagers and a grandson that we actually had custody of full time. And then I had 3 little ones that were in preschool. They actually graduated from preschool. My oldest 2 did on the day of his death, actually like 3 hours later.
Wow. Oh
it was
my gosh.
It was devastating, absolutely devastating, because I left the hospital after getting the news, being a total mess, and knowing that he would want me to be there for them. So I went directly from the hospital to the preschool graduation.
That takes some strength, and gosh, and what a handful to be left with too. I mean, not that you ever begrudge that, but you just realize that once you lose a key support in your life, that, you know, you are on your own, and there's a lot that goes hand in hand with that to manage. So did you receive any really good grief counseling or support following that?
No, I did not. I did not have a lot of family support because everybody just views me as this strong person. And it's tradition around here whenever, you know, someone passes away that friends and relatives bring meals over and they're there to check on the widows and things of that nature. And none of that happened. I remember complaining once and my cousin brought over a couple of pizzas and that was it.
Oh, that stinks. Sorry about that, but that just makes you feel like you've really been abandoned and let down, and you know, why don't I? You know, what's wrong with me that I don't get that same support? Yeah,
it was really awful. It was one of the darkest times in my life, and I was afraid to go to therapy because I was pretty sure that they were going to lock me up. And honestly, I felt that I needed that, but there was nobody to take care of my kids. And like I said, they were little. And very quickly, the teenagers started going with other relatives and things of that nature and going to people that they were closer to. And my whole world just fell apart in the matter of days.
Oh, Jenna, jeepers. That is such a tragic story. But one I imagine that people are going through on a daily basis, just, you know, maybe in different shades of what you've experienced. But there are a lot of people out there without any support in that. Do you think that influenced you being drawn into an abusive relationship that followed and after you were widowed?
Absolutely, because as I was widowed, during the funeral, there were friends of his and just other men that they were hitting on me. And they were...
At the funeral?
At the funeral. And they were showing up at the apartment days later. So I looked for a male support person, just a friend, to kind of deflect some of that, to get them to stop coming around because I didn't feel safe. And the guy that said he was my friend and totally understood that I wasn't ready for a relationship ended up pressuring me into one. And even though I was not for him, I didn't really like him all that well, not in that way, I allowed it to happen because I thought that it's just a problem with me. You know, it's just where I'm mourning. He seems to be like a good guy and I don't want to just let him go because he's trying to support me. And then slowly narcissistic behavior and abuse grew from that.
Do you think that lack of belief in yourself and being able to make those good decisions or trust those decisions and those instincts of yourself, that comes and stems from, you know, earlier childhood stuff and trauma?
Absolutely. I did have a very rough childhood. I did have abuse and sexual assault happening from the age of 4 years old all the way up until I was around 12. And so while my brain was forming the most important parts of me, I was in those types of situations, and you create patterns and you confuse sex and love, and you're used to that kind of negative attention. And that's how you feel that relationships are supposed to be.
Yeah. It's so distorted, and it's a huge feeling when you can't really trust yourself or believe in yourself. So what would be 3 big signs that you would recommend to our listeners that they look out for, that you wished you had seen for yourself?
One of the things that I like to talk about, because there's so many things about red flags out there on the internet that's available, but to really, really reach out to someone, one really big, important one is, how does a man treat his mother? Because she is the most important woman in his life and has been his entire life. If he mistreats her and talks down to her and is constantly arguing and fighting and downplaying that relationship, then you might have a problem. Because if she's the most important woman in his life and he disrespects and hates her, then for no reason. I mean, there are some situations where it would be understandable, but those are kind of extreme situations. But if there's no reason and he treats her like that, how's he going to treat you in a few years? Because you're never going to be more important than a man's mother. Another one, it really is. People say, something as simple as having a good relationship with his mother, but that doesn't really talk about it, So another thing to really think about and consider is, if you're in a good relationship, you're going to be able to have discussions where you understand and empathize with each other's feelings and not necessarily yelling and screaming. If you're in a relationship where the yelling and screaming does happen and it's never resolved and they put the blame on you, then you really need to be thinking about that, because you're not always to blame. They need to know that your feelings are valid and important, and they don't get to decide that they didn't hurt you. They don't get to decide that everything is always your fault. You need to be able to communicate, step back whenever you're not in that dramatic moment, and be able to consider each other's emotions and feelings and the reasons behind that. And they need to care about why they made you feel that way. If they don't care and they're just trying to turn the tables on you, then you have a real problem. That's narcissism.
That is so, so important, because I understand so many times people are not heard or not listened to, or don't feel that, what they want matters. And it's all about that communication within relationships. But it's not about disagreeing so much. It's understanding where each other is coming from, because you're shaped from your own experiences. And so 2 people coming together have completely different experiences. And so they're going to see the same thing from different perspectives. So that communication, that discussion is about, why do you feel like that? So I don't feel like that, but share with me why you do. What's that look like for you? How does that sound to you? Share with me. That's what it's about, isn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because they need to care why. They need to care about who you are, and use that as a learning experience to learn more about you and love those parts of you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're going to move on now to what really, really excites me. And I'll let you decide whether you relate this back to your books, if that's easier. How did you get yourself out of these types of situations? And then, once you've done that, how do you then go on to thrive? So 2 very big questions there.
Okay, so that's an easy question, but a hard question, because how far in depth do I really want to go? I would say that whenever I was in the abusive relationship, there came a time whenever I was no longer allowed to mourn my husband. And that's when writing came and started to happen for me. And within the gray is everything that should have happened. I should have gotten help. I should have been able to go to the crisis center, and I should have had a man in my life because I'm a hopeless romantic. So it always kind of comes back to that.
Yeah.
For me, not everybody is like that, but I really wanted a very supportive person who cared about who I was as a person. And so I didn't have those things, and I knew I didn't have those things. So I created them in a book. And as I was writing, now mind you, I didn't have Microsoft Word or Google Documents or anything fancy. I actually wrote within the gray and emails to myself. So truly, yes. It was, I went on to my Gmail and I sent a message to myself, and I would just continue replying to those.
Oh, my
That's how I wrote.
That's incredible.
That was determination.
Yeah.
But that's
I'm glad you found that outlet. Yeah.
And so that's how that started. And I created a playlist on YouTube. And as I grew and the book grew, I started to heal. So and there's actually this really great story behind this. And I love talking about Within the Gray just because of that. So all of the things that I wanted to happen. And in the book, very early on, the support person who becomes a love interest gives the main character a journal to help her through things and to give her an outlet. It was a journal with gold-edged pages. And, oh my goodness, I might just cry.
Oh, you go ahead. If you want to cry, you cry.
And so, but this support person was very creative and very knowledgeable and compassionate. And that's what I wrote about. As I was writing, I started to heal and I started to understand myself and recognize everything that was happening around me. And that kind of gave me fuel to want to get out. And so I was in the process of figuring out how to get out whenever I finished writing the first draft of the book. And then I put it away. And then during that 6 months, my entire life completely and utterly changed. And at the end of writing the book, I figured out how to get out. And that involved being able to stand up for myself in a very strong way repeatedly. It was a war zone. So it was one battle at a time, taking just a few moments of courage. And he was constantly trying to wear me down because at this point, there was a lot of things that had happened. There was a lot of abuse, a lot of grooming, and a lot of mind tricks where I thought I was completely crazy at one point. But writing the book helped me kind of see that there is a better life out there. And getting in touch with who I was as a person made me want to leave the job that I was in and made me want to, at the very least, be able to still take care of my family and pursue these creative endeavors. But he didn't like that at all. But whenever I finished the book, I set it down. And like I said, that was the 6 months where my life completely and utterly changed. I went from living in hell to learning to believe in myself again and going through tremendous amounts of journaling and therapy and finding this amazing support person that had just been a customer in my store that slowly became a friend.
So did you have to keep that hidden, that relationship with that support person?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, no, I did, but I didn't. I mean, he was just a friend, so it was completely innocent. And so I tried to be honest because I didn't want more backlash than what there was always already going to be. And there was. I paid dearly for that friendship in every way that you can possibly imagine. But in that 6 months, I finished writing the book in September. I filed the divorce papers the first part of January, and the last day of February, the divorce was final. And he finally left because he wouldn't leave until the actual day. And then very, very soon afterwards, that support person became a lot more than just a friend. And
it's almost like your story. It's almost like your story playing out in real life.
Absolutely. So I'm getting to that. Whenever I picked up Within the Gray to start editing and just kind of looking it over, And it was absolutely him, like everything about him. And, for Christmas, where he and I were just close friends, he bought me a journal to help me sort through my feelings and help me get through it. And it looked almost exactly as I described it. And whenever I was reading through the book, the way he dressed, the way he moves, his hobbies, his backstory, everything was almost completely exact. And it was like I had written him into existence. And here this man who I had just finally held hands with, and we had admitted that now that everything was finally over with my ex, that we really did have feelings for each other. And we slowly, we knew so much about each other because he was my support person. He's a psychology student in the graduate program. So this was someone who knew what they were talking about. And he and I helped each other a lot. I helped him just as much as he did me. And there was a lot of examination about beliefs and making sure that it was real. And then it was undeniable. And even though neither one of us wanted to be in a relationship, we were. And those feelings just couldn't be held back. But knowing that he was, just seeing that in writing, and before I even really knew him, I had thought of him and drew him to me is the most beautiful thing in the world. The backstory on Within the Gray, that it just amazes me every time I think about it. And we're getting married in June.
Whoa, now you're going to make me cry, because this is just incredible and so much more than I ever expected. So congratulations. Oh my gosh. Can you just share with me, do you think that through your writing and becoming so clear on what you wanted for yourself helped attract and bring about that happening in your real life?
Absolutely. I thoroughly believe that, because there's really no other explanation. Because it allowed me to be clear. It allowed me to see for myself what I deserved and what I wanted. And it was right there in the open. And I wasn't going to settle for anything less. And even though I wasn't looking for a relationship, that relationship found me. And in my healing, because that was just really the beginning of my healing, having that open compassion and empathy that we have for each other has allowed me to continue to grow over the past few years. Because we've been officially a couple for 3 years now, and we've known each other for 5.
Yeah.
And I've done so much healing and so much work towards myself that I've become a new person, and I live in what feels like a fairy tale 3 years later. And there's a lot of questioning and making sure and just examining things and making sure that it's healthy. But it is still such a beautiful life, because I love so much stronger. I appreciate things that I would have taken for granted before. And just the life that I have, the sun is brighter, the world is more beautiful. I have myself where I never really had myself before. And I have the freedom to be me and to have my personal time, and I have my boundaries, and I can live as I am. And there's no expectations for me to be anything else. And he encourages and supports me every step of the way. And I live in a world that I couldn't have possibly even imagined before, because it has gone so much further than what the story was Within the Gray.
Oh, Jenna, you had my heart. That is so incredible. And I'm such a believer in that, because I too have, come from quite a traumatic background, nothing compared to yours, but nonetheless, trauma sets up a whole lot of self-limiting beliefs and what have you that influence your life. And I have spent the past couple of years really working on myself, really working through those. And again, my whole entire life has changed also. So I so understand what you're talking about. And I think this is what we want our listeners to understand, is that the backstory is your backstory. And, you can never take that away from you. But what you have going forward can really be the fairy tale.
Oh, absolutely. Fairy tales can exist. They're just not. You need to rescue yourself and not expect someone else to do it. I think that's really important.
Yes.
Because yes, it's a fairy tale and you have the love that you want. And I have my Prince Charming, but I saved myself.
You have to do the work.
Yes, I saved myself. I had to do the work because unless you change those thought patterns and really examine yourself, it's not possible. And one of those things that I just want to bring up really quick is that people are so afraid of being triggered. And I know that it's hard. I really do, because I've been there and I've triggered myself a lot to get to where I am. But it's so important to not be afraid of those. And I've talked to a lot of mental health professionals and a lot of psychologists, and every single one of them have agreed with me that being triggered is a sign that you need to work on something. It's your body and your mind telling you, hey, focus on this. You can heal and you can grow from this. But it's important to realize that when you're triggered, you're not living in those moments again. They're just memories. And the more you recall those memories, the weaker they get. That's also how, when you're in that emotional state and you're triggered, get your journal out, get an audio recorder, whatever works best for you, and express those emotions, even if they make absolutely no sense to you at the time. Just write or talk and get those emotions out and realize that your feelings are valid. They are yours and nobody can take them away from you. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be hurt. That's how you learn and grow. When you are not in that emotional crisis point, that's a great opportunity to look back on what you've said or what you've written and see your patterns and look back and discover those reasons why. And let's face it, if you're seeing a mental health professional, if you are lucky enough to be able to have insurance to be able to do that, you're only seeing them once or twice a month and they are very limited on what they can do. So if you feel comfortable, that is a tool that you can take to them and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. Make notes. Okay, this is what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing. And they can better help you. Your support person can help you more. It will help with your healing dramatically because you're embracing and recognizing those feelings instead of burying them deep inside.
That is such valid and important information, Jenna. Thank you so very much for sharing. I know that's going to resonate with people listening out there because they're just going to see what you're talking about. And I think it's important to also understand that when you do get those triggers back again, sometimes you can do all the healing. You can do years and years and years of healings. And somewhere deep within you is still this piece of yuck that, gets triggered when something happens years later. And it's about saying, okay, time for that piece to go. Yeah, I hear you. I see you. I'm going to acknowledge you. And it's time, for me to deal with this and not to have that feeling or those feelings anymore. So what would you consider the main challenges that people face once they get out of an abusive situation? And what sort of things would hold them back from getting out of that situation?
I think once you physically get out, and the limitations on that is sometimes there's nowhere to go. For me, there was no shelter. There was no family support. As I mentioned earlier, while I have a family that loves me, I didn't exactly have the support I needed whenever I lost my husband. So being able to take me and 3 children to another home or having a place to go was not something that was valid or able to happen in any way possible. So once I did manage to figure out how to get him to leave willingly, which was challenging and has a whole other set of circumstances, the most important thing isn't just leaving physically. You have to leave mentally, because a lot of the problems that people face is their bodies may not be in that situation anymore, but their minds are. So you can't be afraid to heal. And then you say, well, I should be strong. I'm out of that situation. I'm fine now. But your mind isn't fine. It goes back to recognizing and realizing that it's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry and want revenge and want all of these things. But unless you recognize those feelings and stop burying them, you are not going to heal. Anything that you do, you're still going to be trapped in that cage, and he still has a hold of you until you learn to heal, embrace those emotions and those triggers, and be able to work through them and find your healing and find your path.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing from you when you're saying that is actually start doing the healing before you actually do the leaving. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
That's what I did, and it worked out really well for me.
That's such an important piece of information. I love that because, yeah, like you say, most people get out, but then it's their mind that still keeps them trapped, whatever they've just left. And if you can get that mind strong before you do the leaving, then that's going to help you on the whole journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
For people, it's okay. I'm really bad about that too. For people that get their copy of Sheila's Men, I highly recommend that you do, because it can help so much with your healing process. Because I not only discuss what happened to me, the bad, the worse, the extremely suicidal, to the healing process is all there. Everything that I was thinking, everything that I was feeling is there. And it's there to help people. It was part of my healing journey, and now it can be a part of yours. Because as I got the feedback that I received from it, as I started to finish the book, I knew that it was about a whole lot more than just me. We don't talk about these stories enough. We don't get into the thought process. We have people who are asking, well, why didn't you just leave? And those are such hurtful comments and questions for all of us, really, because it's not that simple. For one, you may not even realize you're in an abusive relationship. And for another, you may be genuinely afraid for your life, or you may not have anywhere to go. And that's why this book is so important. And it shows the healing, because you need to have strength to stand up to your abuser and get them out, or get you out, whatever it takes. And that strength comes from within. It's not physical strength.
Yes. Yes, I highly recommend that too, because we can talk and you can say stuff, but, we can't impart what it was that you actually went through, all those emotions and all that toing and froing and what happened then, and when you tried this, what then happened. We can't cover all those different scenarios just speaking like we are speaking. Yet if you've got a resource like your book, Sheila's Men, to go back to and read and really understand that, despite what you're going through, if you can just start to put different tools in place that will enable you to lead your life from an empowered place, even if you still feel trapped.
Absolutely, because your mind doesn't have to be trapped. I mean, you can't move on while you're still there. You're still going to be going through trauma until they're completely out of your life. I can't disagree with that, but you can start to heal. You can start to find yourself again, and that gives you strength.
Yes.
And it can start as something as simple as writing a list of things that you really want to do that you can't do right then. Like for me, it started out like big and grand. Like, I want to go to trips to the beach 3 or 4 times a year. I want to go to Italy, and I want to do this and that. And you know what it turned into? Little things like, I don't want to be lectured for wearing black. I want a car that I actually like, Yeah. And then okay, so what kind of car do I actually like? And then I didn't know simply because everyone else's opinion had always mattered. And I'd always just went with that and never really thought for myself about that and never even realized it was an issue. Because we as women, whenever it comes to vehicles and some other things in our lives, it's very much like, oh, well, my dad says that this is a good car, so I'll go with something like that. Or my husband thinks that this would be reliable, so I'll go with something like that. Oh, I like that color better. Or, you have like 2 or 3 options and that's about it. But it was a whole other experience to not think about what anybody else thought and go to different car lots and try out like every different car and search online and find something that was really me. And it took some time to like free my mind from everyone else's opinions. And that's just kind of like the baby steps. Baby steps are important.
That's the beauty of journaling, though, isn't it? Is that you start to ask yourself, what is it I want? What do I want? Because sometimes many people have never, ever, ever, ever in their lives thought about what it is they actually want. And
Exactly.
I love that. Yeah. Oh, so good. Do you think all survivors can heal to lead fulfilling lives?
I do. It may take different amounts of work because every traumatic event affects everyone differently, and that's okay. Maybe you went through more than I did. Maybe you went through less. That doesn't make your trauma any less important than someone else's. And the healing process is all very individualized. These are just starting tools that will start you on your path. The book is an amazing tool. It's not just a book. It's something that can open up much needed conversations in our world. And it's a way to get you to think, a way for people to see from the other side. And people who haven't been through trauma, maybe they know someone who has, because let's face it, it's so common and so rampant in our society that everyone knows someone who has. And maybe someone listening is thinking, well, why didn't they just leave? That just seems crazy. They can pick up this book and they can start to understand from a victim and a survivor's perspective, because not all victims become survivors. And that is the saddest thing in the world to me. So many people lose their lives to suicide, or they stay chained up in that place. And I want that to stop. I want people to feel the love and the joy and the fairy tale ending that I have, because I believe it's possible. Your story may not, and your happily ever after may not look like mine. And that's okay, because you're not me. But anything is possible on the other side.
You're bringing me to tears again, Jenna. Absolutely. What you've just said there is so powerful. That's what we have to do, empower people to believe that they are worth enough, that they can believe that they don't have to be a victim, that they can be a survivor.
It's so important. It's so, so important, because you don't see a way out for the longest time. And even whenever you're physically gone, you're still wrapped up in that. And it's so hard to just let go, because you can't just let go. You need to go through the process of healing. You need to be able to allow yourself to be triggered and embrace those emotions and recognize that they are a part of you. Because if you don't, you're not going to find that healing. And that's why this book is so important, and why it is so important to just embrace who you are and find who you are, because your happily ever after is waiting for you.
We are talking a lot about women and the abuse of women, and we know it's so dreadfully prevalent in societies around the world, regardless of what form it takes. But you also mentioned being an advocate for men's health as well, and I love that, because I know here in New Zealand, that is something that's hugely underreported, and there are many men who are suffering in silence as well. They too need to be acknowledged and have access to the support to deal with their experiences without judgment. What do you see in your volunteer work around this?
I see a lot, but I see less in my volunteer work and more in my social media and just getting to know some of these guys. Some of my greatest supporters have been men, and I don't want to ever forget them, because men who go through sexual assault and trauma, they are so often forgotten because there's so many different myths around it. Just trying to find the words, because I can sit here and I can almost feel their anguish as well, because I've known many men who are victims, some who become survivors. But for the most part, you have to think from a male's perspective. There's a lot of shame, and a straight man who is sexually assaulted by another man often thinks that there's something wrong with him, or he got an erection, so does that mean that he's not straight? There's all of these questions, and people are so quick to point a finger and stereotype homosexuals as being sexually deviant. And while they may be very sexual, that doesn't mean that they are abusers. And we don't need to put this stigma on them, because they're people too, and they deserve love and appreciation and empathy as much as anyone else. But one of the most interesting things that I've found is that almost every time there is male on male sexual assault, both of them are straight. Another interesting fact is that they do not report, because they are afraid of that fear and stigma. Because they're a man, they should be able to stand up for themselves. And if a man receives and obtains an erection during an assault, they are automatically seen as somebody who wanted it. But an erection is only a biological response. That does not mean that the mind and the heart wanted that at all. And they shame themselves for that. And there shouldn't be shame in that, because it's just like any other part of our bodies. It's an automatic response, and it should not be shamed for that, because that wasn't their fault. That doesn't mean that they were willing. And it's so important, because they are so ashamed and they are so bound up by what has happened to them that it becomes very confusing. And men don't need to be shamed any more than women do. And we need to be able to talk about that.
Gosh, that's wonderful what you've just said there, because I think that's what it's about. We need to be having these conversations. We need to be recognizing that this is also happening to men on such a big scale, and we need to bring it out in the open so that they don't need to feel that shame, that judgment, and whatever else that goes hand in hand with that, and that everybody just deserves to be respected and loved. I love the work you're doing around this. Thank you so much. Within the Grey, which you released in 2020, is about a young widowed mum who faces rumors of her deceased husband's betrayal, aggressive advances, and traumatic events that keep unraveling. And can Tara, the main character, trust and find joy again? So I think we know, just from our discussion today, that this is very loosely biographical in the regard of this is what you were wanting your own story to play out like, and you've used your own firsthand experiences in this book. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. It is. Most of it is made up, but the stories around my husband and the rumors of his betrayal are all very true. But it was a support person that I created and brought into life. So that's part of what makes this story so beautiful.
So is this going to give people hope? People who are in this situation, like just listening to you now, I just think, oh my gosh, having your own fairy tale from actually going through the process of writing this book is so magical in itself. But I want to understand, if somebody is getting this book themselves and reading it, is the purpose of this book to give them that hope and that belief that they too can experience that journey?
Absolutely. Both books are like that. Sheila's Men is much more powerful and much more poignant. And there's a whole lot more going on in that I think people can relate to. And both of them are such important books. And I'm very proud to have been able to author them.
Fantastic. Because I know that Sheila's Men sounds, deep and quite raw. It contains language and scenarios related to self-harm, suicide, abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, financial abuse, whatever form that takes. And it's going to be triggering for some people who are reading. And it's so brave of you to go there with so much raw honesty and just share with us again why you felt you needed to go with so much depth of emotion.
Because nobody else does. Because it's not just about me. It's about everyone else too. I wanted to be able to create a tool and put my story out there in a way that would help others. I often say everyone has skeletons in their closet. I just happen to open the door and put a spotlight on them. Because my mistakes are in there as well. It's just not his mistakes. And, with it being Sheila's Men, there's obviously more than one man, and there's a whole lot going on in this book. But what good is it going to do if I'm just another person who is glossing over the details and not showing the thought process? That doesn't make me different. Being able to love these things, it's what's important, because people need to be able to relate, not just on a surface level, but on a deep level where they can connect and see themselves. One of the interesting things about Sheila's Men is that I never, ever describe Sheila. And on the cover, she's in black and white, and you see her from the back. So you do not see her face, because she is every woman. I'm not going to let a description get in the way of how you view her in your mind, because as you read, you may see yourself. You may see a friend or a family member. And nothing needs to stand in the way of that. It's so important to be able to see yourself in this book. And that's part of what makes it so powerful.
Yeah, that's exactly my words. I was just going to say, the phrase you used earlier, glossing over stuff. And now you're talking about how powerful this book is. And that is exactly what came to mind when you were speaking, that this is a book that, tells it like it is. And it's a story that needs to be heard and shared, and we need to be opening up and it's almost like opening up Pandora's box, isn't it? Letting it all out. Because once you release it, it can never go back in again. And that's where the healing comes from, and that's where change comes from.
Absolutely.
So proud of you doing this. Oh my gosh, Jenna, I'm going to get this book. Don't look. Big tick on that one, because you've just got me absolutely riveted with how this is going to look for so many different people out there who are struggling to find and make sense of themselves and find their own tools and their way forward and things like that. So I'm excited. So, okay, let's finish up with, what is the best thing that has happened to you so far
today? I woke up, and something as simple as being able to sit at the kitchen table with my fiance and him just supporting me and being able to be here. I mean, I appreciate every moment in life in a way that I never could before. So that's like a hard question, but I also know that he's waiting for me on the other side of that door, and he'll give me a hug and a nice little kiss and tell me he's proud of me.
That's so beautiful. So what is the proudest moment do you consider? There may be many, and I think in your case there are many, but what do you consider your proudest moment to date?
Being able to get out and being able to embrace life again. And I don't want to give anything away, but one of my proudest moments is being able to stand up for myself, find who I am again. And I'm very proud of the ending of Sheila's Men.
Oh, Okay, that gives me even more reason to get it and read it. All right. What is your go-to when your day turns to custard, when things are not going well, where you have a moment where, just looks dark? What's your go-to?
I take a lot of bubble baths.
Oh, great.
I take a lot of bubble baths, and that's went from being like a once a week kind of coping thing to anytime that I get discouraged, I will just look at my family and going, okay, I'm having a rough day. I'm going to go disappear into the land of bubbles, and they are cool with that. So,
oh, you are a hopeless romantic, aren't you?
I really am. I spend time with my Cocker Spaniel. He's 10 months now, so he's very loving.
What's his name?
Sebastian. Sir Sebastian Bark.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's a writer's name for it.
It's really.
What three takeaways would you like to leave with our listeners?
You can survive. You can move from being a victim and get out of that mind state and become a survivor. Don't be afraid to be triggered. It's just a part of you that wants to be healed. Embrace it. And life is beautiful on the other side of grief.
Oh, I love this. Love it so much. And people wanting to go right now and get a copy of your book, how can they do that?
They can go just about anywhere to get a copy of my book. If you go to a brick and mortar store, you're probably going to have to order it because they're a little slow. But you can order it anywhere online, with the easiest always being Amazon, but it's also available on Google Play, Barnes & Noble, Apple, everywhere. You can find it everywhere.
Wonderful. And I'm going to have the links in the episode notes and your contact details so people can reach out to you if they resonate with your story and just want to ask you more. And so definitely that will be there for them. And Jenna, honestly, I want to just thank you so much for the value that you have provided in our chat today. Honestly, this is far, far greater than what I imagined from the outset. And I knew it was going to be gold then. And I just want to thank you for the wisdom that you've shared with people, with the honesty, with the rawness of what you've been through, and the openness and the willingness that you have for others to be able to go from being a victim to being a survivor. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be able to share, and hopefully it changes someone's life.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. Let me know how I'm doing, or if there's a topic you'd like covered, by clicking on the Healing to Be You Gmail link, or going to the Healing to Be You website. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button, and please share if you know of someone who could benefit from this episode. Until next time, be kind to you and take good care.